The criminal investigation hits a brick wall. 6 months after the disaster, the FBI has found no evidence of a missile strike or terrorist bomb. Now the NTSB focuses on catastrophic mechanical failure as the likely cause of the crash. In the hangar at Calverton, New York, Jim Wildey and his team start to reassemble the 747 from almost 1 million pieces of debris. It takes them 3 months to complete the center section. The fuselage is riddled with fractures. To trace where the plane's breakup started, Wildey first needs to calculate the sequence of the fractures.
All of these early fractures stemmed from one location, and that was right here in the fuselage, just in front of the front spar, near the bottom of the airplane.
The fracture sequence allows Wildey to work out how the plane broke up. The fractures underneath the plane radiate out, tearing away part of the belly of the plane. With the bottom of the fuselage gone, new fractures race upwards on both sides of the jumbo jet. When they meet, the nose is torn away from the rest of the plane. Now Wildey must find what triggered the initial fracturing. He looks behind the spot where the fractures begin. It's the site of the 747's biggest fuel tank, the massive center wing tank. It's as big as a 2-car garage. Panels of aluminium, called spanwise beams, divide the space into sections. Wildey hunts for clues. Inside the tank, he discovers something disturbing. A series of dents in the front of the tank, known as the front spar. It's an extraordinary discovery. Wildey believes the dents were caused by spanwise beams slamming into it. The most likely scenario for the damage? An explosion inside the tank.
This impact damage, it fractured, it buckled, and it damaged these stiffeners and started the breakup of the front spar, and then the continued breakup of the airplane from this point.
Wildey's convinced an explosion in the center wing tank must have been the fatal trigger for the plane's breakup. The obvious culprit for such a blast, jet fuel. Investigators examine the fueling records at JFK. They find that the ground crew left Flight 800's center wing tank almost empty, with just 190 liters of Jet A fuel in it. That's just a puddle in the bottom. It seems a small amount of fuel to cause such extensive damage. But Wildey knows that Jet A fuel has unusual properties, as this footage, taken at Federal Aviation Authority testing labs, shows. In its liquid state, Jet A fuel is not highly flammable. But when it's enclosed in a tank and heated up, it vaporizes, becoming easy to ignite. Now investigators must discover whether the fuel in Flight 800's center wing tank could have been heated to flashpoint. They know that right underneath the center wing tank lie the plane's air conditioning packs. They produce cool, breathable cabin air using hot air taken from the jet engines.
So we have this extremely hot air, hot enough to cook a chicken, within inches of the bottom of the tank itself.
Investigators calculate that the flash point of the fuel in the center wing tank would be remarkably low, just 35.8 degrees Celsius. Could the air conditioners have heated the fuel enough to reach this critical temperature? To find out, NTSB and FAA scientists mount an audacious experiment to restage Flight 800. They fill the center wing tank of a 747 with 189 liters of Jet A fuel and fit it with 90 temperature sensors. The plane sits on the tarmac with the air conditioning on for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Then the 747 takes off. It follows the same ascent profile as Flight 800. It's a calculated risk, but no greater than thousands of planes undergo every day. 12 minutes later, it reaches 4,200 meters, the point at which TWA 800 exploded. Investigators examine the readings from the temperature sensors. What they find horrifies them. The temperature in the center wing tank is 53 degrees Celsius, a full 17 degrees past the fuel's flash point.
The test flight conclusively showed that the center wing tank had become flammable.
To confirm that it could cause a blast strong enough to rupture the reinforced aluminium center wing tank, engineers build a 1/4 scale model. They fill it with jet fuel vapor. Then they ignite it. The force of the blast is more than enough to rupture the tank.
The tests were able to show the pressures that could develop in the tank to the point that it would burst.
But investigators are mystified about what might have ignited the fuel vapor. They know there were 7 in-flight fuel tank explosions in the previous 33 years. All were triggered by dramatic events such as lightning strikes, sabotage, or even an engine falling off. Bob Swaim investigates these and dozens more potential ignition sources. He concludes that the ignition source must be something electrical inside the fuel tank.
As we ruled out numerous potential ignition sources, what we came back to again and again was the wiring and the fuel quantity indication system.
Wires run from the cockpit to fuel probes inside the center wing tank.
The wiring crosses near the top of the fuel tank, routed to the terminal block, as you see here.
Swaim studies the terminal block. He discovers that it has dangerously sharp edges.
And it was sharp and hard enough that it could cut through the insulation of the wiring.
Swaim suspects there may well have been an exposed wire in the fuel tank. That could create a dangerous spark. But there's a puzzle. The wires inside the fuel tank are designed to carry a very low voltage, too low to cause a spark. Swaim follows the fuel probe wires outside the fuel tank. Here they join high voltage wires for the cabin lights and other aircraft systems, which run in bundles through the belly of the 25-year-old plane. He looks more closely at the surviving wiring on the crashed 747 and on other jumbo jets of a similar age, and makes a disturbing discovery.
We were shocked by the condition of the wiring we found.
Swaim finds the remains of fluid spills and sharp metal shavings among the bundles of wire. He also finds chafed wires, wires repaired with tape, and even some with cracked insulation. He concludes that the poor state of wiring on older 747s could allow high voltage electricity to jump into the fuel tank wires. It could then pass into the fuel tank, causing a short circuit. The resulting spark would ignite the fuel vapor. Investigators know there are some 1,200 other 747s in service around the world. Any one of them could be flying with a fatal flaw, putting thousands of passengers in serious danger. The NTSB believe a fuel tank explosion blew apart Flight 800 when a short circuit caused a fatal spark. But they have no proof. Short circuits often leave no physical trace in wiring. Their one hope of proving the theory is the plane's black boxes, which hold the only surviving flight data.
800, heavy turn left heading 050, sector climbing around traffic.
The 13-minute cockpit voice recording seems unremarkable.
Climb the 15,000.
But as they replay the tape, investigators hear something intriguing. Just before the recording cuts off, there are two minuscule pauses. They're each just 2 microseconds long. But they're telltale signs of a momentary loss of power to the recorder. It's an astounding discovery. The pause in the recording backs the investigators' theory that there was a short circuit on Flight 800. And it could happen on any one of 1,200 other 747s in service around the world. It's the final piece of the puzzle. Investigators now know the probable chain of events that triggered the loss of TWA Flight 800. What tore apart a 300-ton jumbo jet just 12 minutes into a routine flight and left 230 passengers and crew seconds from disaster? 12.5 minutes to disaster. Flight 800 takes off. Air conditioners have been keeping passengers cool during the delay. But they've also heated the Jet A fuel in the center wing tank to flash point. It's now filled with almost 50 cubic meters of highly explosive fuel-air mix. The 747 is a flying bomb. 44 seconds to go.
Climb the 15,000.
Damaged wiring allows high voltage current to jump into wiring outside the center wing tank and run down into the tank. When the current reaches a section of bare wire, it jumps to another metal surface, forming a short circuit. The resulting spark ignites the deadly mix of fuel and air. Disaster strikes. The explosion blows out one of the inner panels. It strikes the tank's outer skin, smashing it into the plane's fuselage. At a speed of some 650 kilometers per hour, the aircraft is flying under massive pressure. And the first fuselage fracture spreads fast. Now multiple fractures race around the plane. In 4 seconds, they meet, severing the 747's nose. The nose plunges downward like a bullet. The rest of the plane, with most of the passengers still in it, soars upwards. Investigators believe that this is the trail of light eyewitnesses see streaking up into the sky. At 4,600 meters, the main section stalls. A tiny spark has brought down the enormous jumbo jet, killing 230 people. It's over a year before remains of all the crash victims are identified, most by using DNA analysis. The families of the victims band together to build a memorial to their loved ones on Long Island.
The monument in Smith Point is a labor of love.
They got a piece of black marble that they made the centerpiece of it, inscribing all the names on the front.
It's a place for Jim Hurd to remember his son, Jamie.
This is the closest place I can be to where he's buried, because really most of him's out there in the ocean. Or that's where he went.
When the fog begins to roll in, or at the very early morning when the mist is gently there, you can feel the presence of souls.
The disaster is a wake-up call to the aviation industry. The Federal Aviation Administration issues more than 70 airworthiness directives to eliminate any possible source of accidental ignition and improve insulation of wiring to fuel tanks. They affect 7,500 aircraft in the U.S. transport fleet. Boeing implements the FAA orders and also introduces fuel tank inerting, a system that tops up fuel tanks with nitrogen, preventing jet fuel from catching fire. The first commercial jumbo jet, fitted with an inerting system, rolled out in the summer of 2005. And starting from 2007, all new Boeing 7 Series planes will feature the new technology.